So I'll be starting off with priming my face using the LA Girl Face Finity All Day Primer. Then I go ahead to use my foundation, which is the Fit Me foundation from Maybelline, and I use the darker shade on the outer part of my skin, which is in the shade 338, and the lighter shade, which is in the shade 340 on the inner part of my skin. Before blending out my foundation, I make sure I use a setting spray on my face to make it easier for the foundation to blend. And I'm using a foundation brush first, then I go ahead to use a beauty blender to blend off all the excess foundation on my skin. I already did my brows in another video, so if you're interested in that video, I'll leave the link to that video in the comments. So next I move on to concealer, and I'll be using a concealer which is exactly my skin shade, and this is from LA Girl Pro Concealer in the shade Fawn. I use this on where I normally highlight, then I let that sit for some time while I go in and contour my face using a different shade of LA Girl Pro Concealer, which is in the shade Dark Cocoa. So I usually contour high points of my cheekbones, my forehead, my jaw lines, and I try to create like an illusion of a pointy chin by contouring around my chin, and I also contour my nose. Done contouring, I then move on to blending out the concealer using a beauty blender. I always make sure I go back with my contour brush to blend out any harsh lines from the concealer. This just gives a seamless look. The next step, I use a highlighting concealer, and this is a shade lighter than my skin tone, and I'm using the LA Girl Pro Concealer in the shade Warm Honey. I let that concealer sit on my face for some few minutes before I then move on to applying blush. I use this Pink Key Lip and Cheek Mod palette, and I use this shade which has this peachy look, and this works best for my skin tone. So I use this on the highest point of my cheek, my nose, and my forehead. So next I'm going to blend out the concealer, and when I'm done blending out the concealer, I go back with my blush to blend out any harsh lines from the concealer. Done with the cream products, now I just want to set all those cream products in place. For my setting powder, I'll be using Sacha Buttercup setting powder, and I'll be mixing this with a translucent powder because I don't like the yellowish tint Sacha powder gives me. So mixing these together makes it perfect for my skin tone. I'm applying the setting powder lightly on where I used concealers, and now I don't bake anymore because I discovered the technique of just building up the powder. This makes it seem more seamless. For my contour, I'm using this Usher's contour palette all around where I contoured. For my powder blush, I'm using this Carite blush palette, and I apply this on the highest point of my cheeks, and I move it towards my temple and to my forehead, and this gives it a more seamless look. I've been enjoying this technique lately. I'm going over my nose contour with the powder puff just to soften out any harsh lines. I'm using a setting spray to set everything into place. Now for my eye makeup, I'm just going to blend out the concealer to prevent any creasing. Then I'm going to use this shade right here to set the concealer into place. Next, I'm packing this shade right here on the outer corner of my eyes before then blending it out. And as you can see, I was putting a lot because this particular eyeshadow is not very pigmented. Next, I'm using this Kylie eyeshadow palette in this shade to blend everything out. I'm using this black shade to create a little bit of depth because I need a little bit of depth in this eye look. Next, I'm going in with this orange kind of shade on the inner part of my lids, and then this whitish shade on the inner corners of my eyes to give it a form of highlight. Then I'll blend everything using this blending brush. Then I use that same warm shade on my under eyes. I lined my eyes and applied some lashes off camera because I was struggling with the lashes. So now I'm just applying some finishing touches with the setting powder and then highlighting the inner corners of my eyes, my brow bone, my nose, and my cheekbones. Finally setting everything using a setting spray. For my lips, I'm using a regular brown liner to line my lip. And then I use a pink shade in my blush palette on the inner part of my lips. We've come to the end of this video. What would you rate this look over 10? And don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.